I'm going to speak for a bit with this slide as the background, but I want to say, first of all, uh, thanks to the, the many, many people who made this exhibition possible in 1997. I want to acknowledge Ellen Lupton, who oversaw the project, uh, Jen Roos, who was the graphic designer for the project, Christine McKee, who handled objects. There are many, many more I'd like to thank, but I'm just going to have to stop there because we'll spend the rest of the morning talking about that. I'm going to say some general notes about Dreyfuss, and then I've got a page more specifically relating to symbols that I will speak to you about. And so bear with me. One of the things to know about Henry Dreyfuss that jumped out at me at a certain point was Dreyfuss was a New York City native, and few of his contemporaries, I think, were born on the island. Many migrated to New York, but Dreyfuss was a native, as was Doris Marks, and they were separated by almost exactly 1 year in age, being born on October 3rd and October 4th. It's Dreyfuss had a difficult childhood. I should say young adulthood, because at 11, he lost both his father and his grandfather within the same week, and Henry found himself the head of the family. Very luckily, he received a scholarship to study at the Society for Ethical Cultures School, where he not only learned the skills that would help him tremendously as a designer, but also found a sense of moral guidance from the teachers he studied with. From there, he transitioned to being an unpaid understudy to Norman Bel Geddes, who was teaching classes in the evening in design. And we don't know why the breakup came up. I suppose Geddes asked for too much from Dreyfuss, but Dreyfuss adored Geddes. And at the end of his life, in writing his obituary, he said that, "I believe that Norman Bel Geddes was the most important figure in the establishment of industrial design." So there have been quite a number of books on Geddes lately, and I look forward to digging into them for the Dreyfuss material, et cetera. Dreyfuss went into theatrical design in the 1920s. And in 1930, he had 5 shows running at the same time on Broadway. So quite an accomplishment. And that was sort of a jumping off point, because that's around the time that he met Doris Marks, who'd been sent to him by one of his teachers at the Ethical Culture School when Dreyfuss complained that he didn't have the assistance he needed to make his industrial design fledgling business work. Doris's father, Marcus Marks, was very active in reform efforts in New York City. He was part of a reform administration elected around 1911. The family had strong ties to Europe, and in fact, it appears that Mrs. Marks read about daylight saving time in a German language newspaper and conveyed the idea to her husband, who got behind it. So any of you who want to blame daylight saving time on somebody, I think you can lay that at the feet of the Marxes. They were certainly an incredible couple. They summered in Europe and in upper New York State. And in 1930, Doris was sent to meet Henry in his office on 48th Street. And it was love at first sight, and it was a business at first sight as well. It was a incredible thing. Doris went home that day and said to her father, "I met the boy I'm going to marry today." And the next day, Marcus Marks had lunch with Henry. And soon after, they were married. They established a business that was known simply as Henry Dreyfuss. They had 3 children, John, Annie, and Gail. I have to acknowledge the incredible contributions that John and Gail made to my understanding of their parents and their background. Dreyfuss Marx, and Doris Marx was as averse to publicity as Henry was fond of it. So they were kind of an ideal pairing, but she was known as Miss Marx throughout her time at the office. She was never referred to as Mrs. Dreyfuss, even though people figured that out after some time. And their first employee was the wonderful woman, Rita Hart, whom they hired in 1930 at the age of 20. So it's amazing to think about how she spent her career with the Dreyfusses and later with Henry Dreyfuss Associates. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read the next section just so I don't miss anything. Henry Dreyfuss, 1904 to 1972, was described by his contemporary Raymond Spillman as a towering figure. That description is apt, especially when we consider his contributions to the profession of industrial design, apart from his many memorable designs, some of which are considered classics today. During a 40-year career managing a major design firm, Dreyfuss showed a special aptitude for locating and hiring talent while running a lean and productive firm. It says a great deal about his competence in this area when we consider the successful run of his successor firm, Henry Dreyfuss Associates, whose partners were all hired by Dreyfuss, or HD, as he was informally known in the office. This may be a good juncture to point out that while Dreyfuss was at the head of the firm, it was simply known as Henry Dreyfuss, with the and Associates added during a transitional period of 1967 and 1968, and becoming Henry Dreyfuss Associates after Dreyfuss's official departure from the firm on January 1st, 1969. It was at this point that Dreyfuss undertook what might be thought of as his third career, following his early work as a stage designer and transitioning to industrial design beginning in 1928. Can we have the next slide, please? You may be familiar with the end papers from his self-published Records of Industrial Design. Dreyfuss was extremely dedicated to the profession he helped found. His book, Designing for People, has been reprinted several times since its publication in 1955. Found in this volume are some of the firm's earliest anthropometric charts, which went from a case-by-case business following World War II to a comprehensive effort beginning in 1953. Next slide, please. I thought some of you who come from the graphic design business would understand and enjoy seeing Dreyfuss's design output, which he tailored to the clients that he had. He did not engage in graphic design separate from product design. Next slide, please. And here is Alvin Tilley. It's important to acknowledge the seminal role of design engineer Tilley at this point, not only for drawing the charts, but contributing to the research that made them reality. And I mean by this, the anthropometric charts that went into the measure of man, which was published in 1960 and constituted a gift to the industrial design profession. The firm was making available information that others might have held on to as proprietary, but this act of generosity foreshadowed the Symbol Sourcebook by more than a decade. Dorwin Teague, son of Walter Dorwin Teague and a major designer in his own right, told me, quote, "Of course we used it. Everybody used it," end quote. It was followed by Human Scale, a series of discs containing this same information and updated. And finally, The Measure of Man and Woman, the last of Tilley's work for the firm prior to his retirement. Tilley was described by partner James Connor as the backbone of the office. He was also the first member of the office to draw a series of pictographs. Can I have the next slide, please? These pictographs constituted the beginnings of what would develop into the Symbol Sourcebook, although Tilley was not involved in that publication. The story becomes even more involved when we consider the presence of William H. Hewitt, who would become the head of Deere and Company, the agriculture manufacturing powerhouse. Hewitt told me he was traveling across post-war France when he noted the various tractors at work in the fields, and he had a flash of insight that all of those farmers were going to need new tractors in the future. Whether it was Hewitt's idea or Dreyfuss's or Tilley's, the notion of international safety symbols developed into a priority. Next slide, please. There were some teething problems, the principal one being that the French insisted that such equipment must be labeled in French. But by the 1960s, Deere and Company's products, along with others such as Heister, a manufacturer of industrial equipment and forklifts, were routinely featuring such safety symbols, as well as shaped control knobs, but that is another story. Dreyfuss hoped that upon leaving the firm he founded that he would transition to becoming a corporate consultant, which met with mixed results. He continued to have frequent conversation with his close friend Stanley Marcus of Neiman Marcus Department Store, well known during my youth for their extravagant Christmas catalogs. Joyce Hall of Hallmark's Cards was another mutual fan, and HD would take his calls even when they came in the dead of night. But one has the sense that this business of corporate consultancy didn't come to fruition in the manner that Dreyfuss envisioned. And if this was one thing HD was not good at, it was being unoccupied. And this was true of his wife and business partner, Doris Marks. As products of the School of Society for Ethical Culture, they had learned that a life well lived was devoted to others. And herein lies the kernel that led to the Symbol Sourcebook. Next slide, please. Dreyfuss's first investigations began with a mailing called Our Search for Symbols, sent both to international organizations of graphic design as well as informed individuals. Mastery of the avalanche of materials received from this solicitation was a special talent of Mark's, who had served as the business head of the firm Henry Dreyfuss. Hiring talent from outside of the firm he founded, the Dreyfusses began their project in earnest, working from their home in South Pasadena, California. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. I think we're all pretty familiar with this one by now. Here are some updated safety symbols that were done by the office when I was working running their slide room in the 1990s. Next slide, please. We do not know when Doris Marks was diagnosed with cancer, but we do know that they completed their work in the Symbol Sourcebook prior to their deaths by suicide. Two elements of the publication have stayed with me through the years. One was the fact that the foreword to the volume was written by Buckminster Fuller, who was no especial fan of industrial designers, but HD was an exception. The second is a double page of hobo symbols rendered in appearance of chalk as they would have been when homeless men were seeking to identify homes where they might receive a handout and those that were best avoided. This has a special meaning to me because as a teenager, I used to ride freight trains and we would occasionally come upon these, but it was a rarity by that time. And I think this has a special insight into the character of Henry Dreyfuss, who believed in preserving the past as well as looking strongly and rapidly into the future. Next slide, please. Here is Doris Marks in one of her favorite pictures of herself. She was, as I said, publicity shy, and this came to me from the family. Now, I hope that this anecdotal introduction has been of interest and will lead to further investigations of Dreyfuss, his partnership with Marx, and the firm they founded. I have been fortunate that so many people valued their relationship with the Dreyfusses and were willing to speak with me. Kudos to those of you who organized this event. Next slide, please. And this is the final illustration to be found in Designing for People, and I think you'll all recognize Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin. And here is the quote that goes with it. Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs, but sometimes he feels that there is really another way, if he could only stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And I think that's a great place for me to end, because I think we all know what it means to go bump, bump down the stairs and wait for the solid idea to come to us. Anyway, thank you for listening to my brief presentation.